taking a look at, and Steve and Caden, we were kind of just going over reactions as the things that was taking place. So we were kind of going over our definitions of cheating and taking someone else's work. A little bit of a question came up as to whether or not it would show up on homework, or if homework would be part of cheating, or is it strictly a test quiz kind of thing. Previous years, I did have someone give me a definition that if it leaves the room, it's not cheating. Like, if the assignment is meant to leave the room, you're stupid enough to give it to me, Mr. Kane, to leave here, like take-home tests or homework assignments or essays, it's not cheating. If I copy someone else's work within class, then I'll say that's cheating. But if you give it to me and I can walk out that door, it's open game, it's not cheating. Now, no one was going to that great length with it necessarily, but you'll certainly see a whole lot of different definitions to it. And the test preview thing down at the bottom is always a big thing. I just gave a reading check quiz for first period. What's going to happen for fourth period? Certainly people are going to start asking questions. What's this on there? What kind of questions were on there about, do you even know which quiz is on?
Short stories.
Okay, good. You're up to speed. Just talk to anyone? No? Okay. The one question is kind of mean. I acknowledge that ahead of time. Sorry. The one thing I did want to throw out to you was, what was her statistic? Not hers, but one of the studies that she uses as to the percentage of people who admit to some form of cheating. Meredith, do you remember it?
I don't remember the name, but I remember that it was 98.
98%. So if we were to, mathematically put it into fraction form, we would be looking at 49 out of 50. So if we took this class, which is 24 people, when Jake comes back from Ohio, and Luke, hi Luke. Your bag is going to be disappointed when Luke shows up again. But if we were to take this class and double it, we would still need to add 2 more people, and only one of us would never have cheated. Do you agree with that number? You think it should be lower? You think it should be higher? You're going, what do you want, 100%?
Yeah, everybody's cheated at some point.
And we're not going to turn this into, well, when did you cheat or when did you not cheat or anything like this. But, I mean, that is a healthy statistic. And again, that's not saying that 98% of people cheat at all times. That's not saying that 98% of people cheat in the same class or on the same day, but that 98%, 49 out of 50, at some point cheated in their life. Academically, again. I'm not getting into relationships and all that thing, but academically. And certainly a lot of that determines on what do you count as being cheating. I'm not trying to throw Martin under the bus. Martin was going the idea that homework doesn't really count. That's busy work. So you copying someone's math homework down or whatever, you're not going to look at the same way as someone else. In 10th grade, we do vocabulary definitions. Becca and Luke remember those good old days, vocab list 1, you define the terms. Generally, what also happens with vocabulary assignments, especially those type, not only do you have to define the word, but you have to use the word in a sentence. If I give Luke and Becca 10 words, I'm probably going to get 10 definitions that look very much the same because I only have like 2 different types of dictionaries back there. Or if you go to dictionary.com, you're going to be getting the same dictionary. So certainly for something like that, I understand that the wording is going to be very similar, if not the same. But it becomes a little bit different when it's the sentences. If Luke's sentence and Becca's sentence are exactly the same, then I would start to kind of look at that achieving. Whether or not Martin does, that's a whole other ballgame. But I think that number is probably pretty legitimate. What's the follow-up question with a number that's like that staggering? Why? We know Wenky's response. Wenky says, and I don't really disagree with her, she doesn't put the responsibility so much on the student, but she puts the responsibility on the schools. Schools are worried about the grade. And they are. I get assessed based on how well or poorly Monica does on her AP exam. I get assessed based on how well or poorly Luke does on his Keystone exam. So, yeah, schools aren't worried, certainly, about grades and things like that. Why else, do you think? I would say certainly that's part of it. And not finger pointing that we have to go, it's this person's fault, this person's fault, or this entity's fault, but what would be reasons for it?
We have to compete with each other to get the grade.
Okay. We don't advertise it, we do it. But what do we not advertise so far as seniors, juniors, your class? And there's that ugly R word that comes after it. Because a lot of schools, Monica will know I'm number 417 out of 2,118, or I'm number 2, or number 1. But yeah, class rank certainly would be a big deal for it. Because not only do you get into who's ranked number 1, how are you determining that rank? Are you counting weighted classes like CHS where you're getting a 0.4 bump versus honors versus AP? What do all those things mean? But yeah, and competition can certainly be healthy, and that's going to be part of it, especially when you're looking at scholarships, things of that nature. That would be one thing. By the way, I was ranked number 6 when I graduated. Not that you would ever remember those numbers. I got gypped. I did not pass. We don't use the word fail. And I did pass some, like that calc test. Yep, see, there you go.
I don't think many people feel like they're competing rather than cheating. It's pure laziness that people cheat.
Well, and I would say that is definitely the traditional viewpoint. Who cheats? The person who has, for North Hills, the 63% that needs to get to the 65. Pittsburgh Public School, it was the 59% who needs to get up to the 60. We had it easy back then. So yeah, that kind of creates that dichotomy of, is it laziness, or in Wanky's mind, what would be the word that she would use? Too much. Stress, pressure, something along those lines. Again, are you going to get all your eggs into one of those baskets that everyone is lazy or everyone's under too much pressure? No. But yeah, I would agree that traditionally this is the viewpoint that most people look at. I don't think people necessarily, teachers included, will expect those who have the A's and the B grades that are going to be the ones who are ultimately going to be cheating. So yeah, I would agree that's part of maybe the reason why we're so surprised by that number, because 98% means you're not dealing with just people who are lazy, but you're dealing with people who also feel pressure. And I wouldn't say that's just academic pressure, family pressure, job pressure, athletic pressure, social activity pressure, I want to have a life pressure, I got to do my calc homework pressure, is calc chat cheating, or is that using resources? Luke, that was not a question for you. Don't take that the wrong way. And the one point that she also kind of throws up down there at the bottom too is going to be the whole kind of moral thing. Is it a morality issue where morals have tanked within not just the United States, but the whole entire world, and is that a reflection of it? And that's a whole separate question, not one that we can answer in 5 minutes. If it is a reflection of morals, then we might have a problem. And one of those age-old debates is morality something that should be taught, or do we leave it up to home for that to take place? Would you take Morality 101 with Mr. King? Why not? Taking every other class, right?
Exactly.
Would you take math class with Mr. King? Maybe I could teach that one effectively. Just because he's struggling doesn't mean you got to throw Mr. Clark under the bus here.
I don't like him either. I like him. I think he's funny.
Oh, he's funny. He's just so smart, but like he doesn't know how to dumb it down.
So what are you saying about me?
Whatever you want me to
Steven,
say.
I took that as you're dumb. Like you're taking that the same way.
I'm not gonna trust the school teacher.
All right, so if you need to argue that I'm dumb, you would want to make sure that you're able to come up with appropriate evidence for it, hence the Toulmin model. I had a little cartoon added to there, but it's not, didn't save. That's disappointing. There we go. I realize it is not the fall of 2015, as it states right there. And I had a nice little Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. I thought it was pretty good, but it disappeared. This is not anything earth-shattering. It's still worthwhile for us to go over, which is why we're going to do it, because really the basis of all your arguments end up going under the Toulmin model. But it is something that is still good to understand how it works and why we set up arguments the way that we do. How do you, generally speaking, and you know, is the tooth fairy real? Was Humpty Dumpty push? Crushed ice and cube ice probably aren't arguments that would fit under this. But if you're going to research argument position, what do you do? Like, what's your thought process? How do you go about setting it up? Like, what's the first decision I guess you make? You're given a topic. Cheating is bad, or copying homework is cheating. How are you going to go about setting up your argument?
I usually try to identify every part of the prompt because, like, for example, if I was doing my prompt, it was all teachers, and specifically identifying that all teachers carrying guns. That's
Okay.
now a point that I can exploit and really looking in depth at the prompt to,
Okay.
and sort of mold your argument into the prompt.
So understanding like the wording of the resolution, and sometimes you'll get some very key words that can be pretty divisive, all probably for yours being one of them as opposed to maybe some. Nick?
You gotta figure out your position on the topic.
Okay, so am I, and certainly in smart debates you might have had that opportunity to pick or not pick. Luke chose topic, you chose side? So you were able to do that. You got kind of stuck with the position that you're with, but okay, ultimately choosing a position.
I was
Same thing, Luke, anything else? Okay. Theoretically, if you were going to actually, and I don't mean this to sound condescending, that you're not or any of you wouldn't, but if you were actually to learn about the issue in an ideal setting, so you have more than 2 minutes to prepare an argument, say you have 2 weeks, what should you do first? Look for evidence, figure out position.
I think study the general topic itself and get a clear view of both sides.
Okay.
And then picking which one you strongly agree with.
So educate yourself about the position, about the topic, then decide which one works best. Meredith?
You can't write down anything unless you have evidence to back it up.
Okay, having that support for it. And kind of as you research, you're gaining support and finding out which one you want. Truth be told, how do we usually figure out what we want? That's what I believe. And then Google, give me some reasons for blah, 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 blah. And then we kind of start looking at our evidence. Toulmin's model of argument, it's a pretty straightforward, simple thing. And I would suggest kind of drawing the diagram a little bit, just so you kind of understand how it goes. The idea is it would be a process to get to your claim being your argument. Jess, can you see okay? Okay. His argument would be all of these things are synonyms for one another. They're synonymous. Data, evidence, grounds. I tend to use the data term more often than not, but you can certainly say evidence, grounds. It means the same thing, all your evidence. That you would try to accumulate as much information as you possibly can. You accumulate that information, you start to do some reasoning with it, and that leads to your claim. The problem is, me included, where do we usually start? High school relationships are doomed to fail, or are not doomed to fail. Crushed ice is better than cubed. We should close our borders. We should let refugees in. We start with our claim, and then what do? Look for evidence that fits or supports our claim. So we kind of end up with, this is what I want, now I need to find stuff that's going to support it, which is natural, okay? Again, not picking anyone for this is the way that you go about it. But Toulmin would be arguing you need to look for data, you need to look for evidence, you do some reasoning, logic behind that evidence, and then you're able to kind of come to your claim. It's basically like a scientific model, scientific hypothesis. You know, if you are going to come up with a hypothesis, what do you have to do? What do you have to do? Run experiments and kind of look at your evidence. So the challenge that I would kind of give for you is, at the very least, even if you kind of know what your claim is going to be, or you're pretty dead set, because if you're talking about moral, religious, philosophical things, you're going to fall political even. You're certainly going to probably fall into a certain argument. But make sure you don't limit your data, limit your evidence to only the things that are going to be helpful to you. You want to make sure that you do provide some kind of at least reasoning ultimately for it. So his argument would be data leads to warrant, which ultimately leads to the claim. A claim is essentially like your thesis statement. Let me just get some definitions here for a little bit. It's the point that the arguer is trying to make. It is that position that you are taking. So it's the assertion, it's the idea that you want your audience to accept. It would be answering that question, you know, what is the point that you were trying to make? So you should buy your brother a birthday present because he bought one for you. Would you buy your brothers birthday gifts? Do they get you birthday gifts? Every year I send my brothers birthday cards. What do I get? Nothing. Like maybe a 2-day later text message, happy birthday. Maybe. Jeff, he's the middle one. Useless when it comes to birthday cards. But the claim, you should buy your brother a birthday present. There's a key word, especially when it comes to opinion or value, that you can tell that you're dealing with a claim. Can you see any words that would basically identify this is an argument, this is a claim that a person's going to make? It's going to be opinion-based. I think it got whispered. Should, yeah. You should lets you know that you're dealing with some kind of claim. So this is the part that we normally start with, but this would be the point that we actually want to try to kind of end with once we go through our collection. There are 3 different types of claims that show up. You have claims that are fact-based, you have claims that are judgment or value, and you also have policy. We'll cover all 3 throughout the course of the semester. Crushed ice is better than cubed. That is a fact-based claim. It then came down to Meredith, Rigo, and Evan had to come up with facts, reasons to support why it is. A judgment or value one would be worded more along the lines of you should get crushed ice instead of cubed ice, or you should get cubed ice instead of crushed. Should is going to identify opinions, attitudes, subjective evaluations. Should is going to be a keyword that's going to show up in judgment value. Judgment value is probably the easiest to argue because you're dealing more with opinion. If you have a fact-based claim, you have to be able to verify it, you know, pretty much beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that can be a lot more difficult to do. The last one, policy, is more of like legislative bodies. And so when we do student congress later on, we'll get into policy. This is when you are advocating that a certain course of action should be taken. So beginning May 1st, 2017, crushed ice will no longer be offered in all restaurants. Any ice dispensed must be in cubed form of at least 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch.
That's harsh.
I thought you were going to say that's cold. So policy, you're starting legislation. Judgment value, you're doing the should question. And then fact-based, you have to prove something. It is snowing outside. Oh yeah, there's little white things there floating around in the air. Sure is, little white things floating out there in the air. Fact-based, I'm giving facts, there's a little snow stuff out there. Grounds are going to be the proof or evidence that you are going to be using, or that your opponent, your arguer, would be using to kind of verify their overall fact. So before we had what's your point, the grounds ends up being the what is your proof, how come, or why would you argue that. So grounds, again, can consist of a multitude of things. It could be whether statistics, quotations, reports, might be some kind of research findings, physical evidence, or could simply be logic, where you don't have an actual maybe event or answer to point to, but you can do logical assertion, logical reasoning behind it. High school classes should start no earlier than 9 a.m. You like that idea? Okay. Well, why is that useful? We could take showers in the morning, because then Lexus would have more time to get ready and things like that, so she wouldn't have to worry about the whole sleep issue.
It's useful because there's been numerous reports done by individuals within the educational department that show that the amount of sleep that students get is very low, and it impedes their academic achievement. And in models where, or in high schools where the starting time was increased or like started, then yeah.
We're looking at report. I mean, you don't have them right in front of you, but we're looking at reports and findings. We might end up going to statistics, where people will kind of get into sleep cycles, of how a sleep cycle of a 17, 16, 18-year-old is different from that of a 37-year-old. Well, that's not me. 36-year-old or a 9-year-old or something along those lines. People will certainly also kind of go into forms of reasoning. Well, if people are able to sleep in, they'll be more awake and cognizant during first period and second, and participation will be a little bit better. Attendance would be better. Jake would be here in order to defend himself against Luke and attacks about whatever argument ends up coming your way. Rarely will a person's grounds or evidence consist of all of these things. It's going to be a hodgepodge. And the important thing for you to kind of keep in mind is you don't want, and I know I mentioned this about statistics, you don't want to find yourself that you always go back to the same type of evidence, because then you become very, very, very predictable. When my daughters ask me a question, what is my response? Well, if you go back to the ancient times of Mesopotamia and Babylon, and then you just make up some kind of real weirdly worded answer, they ultimately believe me. Sometimes it works with Mrs. King. Eventually, though, after 18 years, she knows that that probably means I'm lying. Probably. So, if we are taking a look, it looks like rain. That would be the claim. What is the evidence? The barometer is falling. Barometric pressure is going down, therefore there's going to be rain. The other Applebee's restaurants I've been in had clean restrooms, so I'll bet this one has clean restrooms too. The argument is, I bet this one is going to have clean restrooms. How come? It would be based on personal experience, anecdotal evidence, comparison. The other ones that I've gone to have had clean restrooms. So in both of these statements, you have a claim and you have some kind of evidence that is there to ultimately back it up. The grounds, the evidence can be based on essentially three things, although they can certainly overlap. You have evidence, so reasoning, the facts, the statistics, the reports, the physical proof. You were going with evidence when it came to the whole sleep issue. You were also, assuming you had more time to kind of look it up, going with source credibility because you had experts, whether it be Department of Education, research studies that were being done, could be testimonials. If you're looking to buy a product with celebrity endorser, you might go, oh my goodness, that person loves it, then I need to get one too. Certainly could be a close friend. Some of you who are still juniors, come Wednesday, you have to go online, start scheduling for classes next year. One of the ways that you might go about getting evidence as to what classes should you sign up for could be close friend or someone say so based on classes that they have had. Someone might come up to you and go, should I take argumentation? And you would go, no, don't do that. And then the other part down here, analysis, reasoning, oops, my thing's backwards, where you have more of that logical approach that would be taking place. And again, a lot of the times it's going to be a conglomerate, a combination of all of these things, but evidence, credibility, analysis, and reasoning. Again, not that one is better than the other, but it's best to kind of have a mix of all of those. And I don't think anything at this point is earth-shattering. Claim, argument, evidence, the stuff that you're using to support it. The part that can sometimes be a little confusing now is going to be the warrant. This is the middle part. You got data on one end, you have claim on the other. What's in the middle is going to be the warrant. This is that inferential leap that connects the claim, the argument with the grounds or the evidence. The problem with it is a lot of the times it goes unstated. You don't have to explain it because it's understood. So it tends to be implicit. One focus that we want to put on in here is you don't want it to be unstated. You want to make that connection as clear as possible beyond a shadow of a doubt. But it requires the listener or the reader, if you're writing something, to recognize the reasoning that makes sense of the claim based on the grounds. You should buy your brother a birthday gift because he got one for you. What's the reasoning? What's the logic? Because the claim is, I should get him a gift. The evidence is, he got one for you. What's the unstated reasoning that holds those two things together? Nick?
Because he did this.
What's because? Like, because he bought one for you is still technically going to count as the evidence? What's like that unstated...
You should do it's the same.
It would be the nice thing to do. You could also argue, throw in that F word.
Fair.
That's a tough one now. Throwing in the family part too.
Fair.
It's fair. Yeah, fair is fair. Then you throw family on top of it. Now there's that emotional attachment. So it would be expected. It would be fair. It would be the nice thing to do. Since he got one for you, it would only be fair that you got him a gift as well. But the evidence would be he got something for you. You should get something for him. Brothers are supposed to reciprocate their love, fondness, appreciation for one another. They just don't when it comes to me.
Maybe they just don't like you.
I mean, it's a lot of birthday gifts in the Rodak family that you gotta.
It's just like a dog candy.
Okay. The girls love going to the dollar store for give them $4 Christmas gifts for like everybody. I get some nice gloves or socks, but hey, it works. So the warrant is that linking function. Essays, questions. If the teacher writes why, how come, they're looking for the warrant. What is connecting your reasoning, your evidence with your overall claim? Warrants, again, can be based on a whole bunch of things. Ethos, logos, pathos, so that source, credibility, authority going with it. Reason, induction or deduction, emotional or motivational appeals. We'll get into the shared values here in a little bit. And again, these categories are not mutually exclusive. They can certainly overlap. Fair is fair. You should get your brother a gift because he got one for you. What do you think? Ethos, pathos, logos. Or which ones?
Logos instead of pathos.
Okay, logos, that whole fair thing. One gets for you, get one for him. Luke brought in the whole family aspect, so that would kind of be some of that emotional appeal. Yeah, you'd probably go with that. Also, you could argue, if dad is telling you, you should get your brother a birthday gift because he got one for you, you could argue that source credibility is also kind of coming in. But why, Dad? I really don't want to. And then he'll come back with the complex question, don't you love your brother? That's tough. What happens if you say yes? Then you should get him a gift. What happens if you say no? No more gifts for you. And that's where that shared value comes in. It says free speech, right to know, fairness, fair is fair, and love could be one of those things. So when people start talking about, but that's a First Amendment right, part of their warrant behind it would be the shared value idea. And then again, the little disclaimer down here at the bottom, categories are not mutually exclusive. We just took a look at how you could potentially have all four of those things going into the warrant. So where people will run into issue, and this wasn't so much happening with the SPAR debates, which is a good sign. People will make their claim, make their argument. And here's my reasoning. This piece of evidence, this piece of evidence, this piece of evidence. Thank you very much. And then sit down. But the main part of the argument is you explaining that connection between the evidence you have and that overall claim that you're going to make. And that's the hard part to do. Sometimes it's hard to put these ideas into words, and sometimes it really is hard to clearly and concisely explain yourself. And so that certainly does take some effort and work on our part. So, quick little example. Muffin, your favorite pet gerbil, is running a temperature. I'll bet she has an infection. Now, the warrant is unstated at this point. What's the claim? What's the overall argument? Aaron? She has an infection. What's my evidence? Has a temperature. What's my warrant? There's some physical sign reasoning. A fever tends to be a reliable sign of some kind of infection or sickness taking place. That dog is probably friendly. It's a golden retriever. Argument being, that dog is friendly, or probably friendly, a little modality. What's the evidence? It's a golden retriever. You're making a generalization so far as your warrant. Most or all golden retrievers tend to be friendly. You know, this happens with those of you who are younger siblings. Oh, another one of those people. Well, dealt with your two older sisters, and now you're here. The hits just keep on. You're the last one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, your quiz on Friday is going to look very much like this. It's not going to be these exact same ones, but you are going to have 3 statements, not in any particular order. You don't have to write these down. But you're going to have 3 statements, and you are going to have to identify which one is the data, which one is the claim, which one is the warrant. I think the one that you probably want to identify first is the, any guesses? The claim. What is the position? Then you can figure out what is the evidence for the position, and then you can try to figure out what that reasoning would be. So, work sharing reduced unemployment in Germany. Germany is similar to the U.S. Work sharing will reduce unemployment in the U.S. Of those 3, which one would you say is the claim itself? Becca? That one's not going to be the claim. The bottom one. Work sharing will reduce unemployment. Will, should tend to be pretty good indicators that you're dealing with a claim. What is the evidence that work sharing will reduce unemployment in the United States, Kendall? It worked in Germany, and so what therefore becomes the warrant or the reasoning? Well, these 2 countries are similar, so therefore it would work there. So this would be grounds, warrant, claim. So on your quiz for Friday, and we'll take a look at some more of these tomorrow just to kind of refresh ourselves, you will have 4 sets of 3 statements. The 3 statements will be together. It's not that you're going to have to mix and match a whole bunch of random things, but you simply have to identify which one is the claim, which one is the evidence or the grounds, the data, and then which one is the warrant or the reason. So 4 sets of 3, you get a point for each one, hence the overall points that we have. But there are not any reading assignments that you have to worry about. There's not any homework assignments that you need to fill out this week. It's simply based on stuff that we're going to be going over today and tomorrow as well with the ToulminModel. And maybe, just maybe, that final showdown will happen. Maybe. Oh, Jake will be here, but then Luke's going to come in late, 3rd period, the next 3 days. What's my evidence? Because I had him last year, 4th period. I have him this year, 4th period. And I can tell when he comes in, that thing's slow.
I was talking to Jake on Friday.